I think so, yeah. It's after 8 now.
All right, we should be good to go.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Hold on.
Hey, Elaine.
Okay,
Nice to see you.
Hi, Shelley. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Elaine. Nice to see you and everybody.
I'll wait just a moment, just for a moment. Let's see. Okay, 8:02. Should we start right on time, I guess? Do we have a lot of people here already? Yes. Oh, we do. Okay. Good morning. I'm Elaine Chapnick, president of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Local Summit, welcoming you along with our co-hosts, LMC Media, to our January meeting. This past week, we all have been riveted to the unprecedented events in our nation's capital, along with the actions of our elected officials there. Today, in a more calm environment, we will hear from our state and county elected officials. They will share with us any legislation that's pending for or proposed that could impact our local community, along with anything else they think we should know about. There will be time for your questions after they speak. I'll now turn the program over to today's chair, Ann McAndrews. Ann.
Thank you. Good morning. Our program this morning features our 3 state and county legislators, Senator Shelley Mayer, Assemblyman Steve Otis, and County Legislator Catherine Parker. Welcome. You're no strangers to the forum. It's wonderful to see you. But today we're all sort of off kilter because the unimaginable has happened of an attempted violent coup. And as one who has worked in the Capitol building, I take this very, very personally. We also have something extra, and that is that where our assemblyman and our senator work, that's the state capitol, is under a threat of attack by violent forces. So the very first thing that we would like to ask, starting with our senator, is what is happening? Not to give away all the secrets, but what's the security arrangements? What have you been told? Have you been told to stay away?
Well, first place, thank you, and thank you for starting with the most pressing thing in our country this moment, this week. And we're also really still shook by it. I've said I'm never going to get over this. This is not something we're going to get over. With respect to your question, one, in the Senate, and Steve can speak, the rules are slightly different in the Assembly. We can participate remotely without being in Albany. So today and yesterday, we are voting on bills. Yesterday, we voted on a package of bills. Today, we were voting on a series of bills. I'm on the Rules Committee. I was on the Elections Committee. I'm doing it all from either from my office in Portchester. I can check in, I can vote. If I wish to speak on a bill, I need to go to Albany. So the question for me personally is, do I want to go there for several reasons? One, this threat to every state capital, including ours. And two, frankly, a very high prevalence of COVID in Albany as well. And you're in an enclosed space. So with respect to security, our leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, yesterday spoke with the top of the state police to get a briefing and to understand the plans. We have to take it very seriously. We can't underestimate it. I raised it the next day with our conference, the concern of my staff and all of us about security there. So one, I think the state police are on top of it. Two, there are provisions so that not every member needs to be there physically. But that being said, forget the members. We have hundreds of staff there and we are concerned about them as well. So I feel quite confident that the state police and the Albany police and the sergeant at arms within the Capitol will do an excellent job of ensuring that there is never going to be a repeat of what happened in Washington in our state capitol. That being said, the idea that we have to prepare for a potential takeover or coup within our state capitol is something we could never have fathomed, and it is never acceptable. And we have to take long-term steps to make sure this never happens again.
Thank you, Senator. Assemblyman Steve Otis, would you care to comment?
I think two things. One reason why people aren't in Albany is obviously because of COVID. And so this past legislative session was a very disjointed 2020, where we sort of had sporadic sessions and it eventually became mostly remote. This year, the plan is it's really all committee meetings in the assembly are totally remote. There's no meeting room for you to go to. And for session, they are abiding by the same rules the public abides by in terms of people congregating in a single place. So if you go to Albany, and they do not encourage it, but if you go and want to speak on the floor in a particular bill, they limit the number of members that could be on the floor. If you come to Albany, they want you to do it by Zoom from your office and not come to the floor. In terms of the violence, the threat of violence, one of the things that occurred to me on last Wednesday and seeing what was going on in Washington and see how ill-prepared the security was in Washington, my takeaway was that would not happen in Albany when we have had big demonstrations and even people coming with guns, and you have SAFE Act people and stuff in the past. The state police were very much on top of the situation in terms of security, and steps are being taken, as Shelley has alluded, to make sure that everything is safe going forward. I think just a broader reflection on, I think, the disgust that we all share. It's been a rough 4 years to begin with in terms of what has become acceptable in terms of political dialogue and the anger that is brought to what is supposed to be a democracy where we respect differing views, and that's sort of out the window. And so you see the ramifications of this in really to say, which we don't believe in America, it's either my way or we're tearing it all down. And this is disgusting. And quite frankly, I am angry to see what separates us really from most of the world. If you look around the world today, democracy is actually on the retreat around the world. And there are fewer active functioning democracies around the world. And we have some work to do. It actually is not going to, the crisis and the coup is not going to end automatically on the 20th, because there's this mentality out there that this is acceptable. So I guess those are my opening comments in this. I do want to say one other thing at the beginning. This is the first summit since the passing of Keith Yeiser, who was a fixture at the summit, and quite frankly, a fixture in the life of Mamaroneck for decades. And what a shocking loss to lose Keith. We would see him sitting in the booth at summit meetings, but see him at countless events, and how important he was to the school kids over decades at Mamaroneck High School. So I know he's in the thoughts of everybody viewing, and certainly in my thoughts, just a tragedy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Parker, I'm going to give you a chance to comment.
Sure. Thank you, Anne. And thank you all for hosting us and having us this month speak to everybody. It's good to see you all. I will say that even in White Plains, as the county seat of government, we have had longtime concerns. In fact, even before COVID started, I had brought in an expert from the FBI who took a look at our facilities and made some recommendations about security, because active shooters, that's a situation that we've been having in this country, and governments have been finding themselves more and more vulnerable. And so at this point in time, when we have had an insurrection at our nation's capital, I think we can't underscore the fact that we need to be prepared. I've spoken with our county executive, and our floor at the McKellian office building in White Plains, as the place where people come to be heard, I think has a situation similar to what the senator and assemblymen are concerned about with their capital. And, you know, we are going to be taking even some extra steps over some things that we have done recently. So I do think, unfortunately, something has changed in the way that our nation, we can come and talk and discuss our differences. And frankly, after what I saw, it really reminds me, you know, just going back to what you learn, your mother taught you when you were young. Find your words, you know, find your words. That's the way to fight. And these people are just, you know, not looking to really solve anything. But we'll be ready. We'll be ready.
Good news. We really have to give the stated topic of this program a nod, but we have many other questions that have come up, obviously, since we started talking about the topic. So I'd like to give you each a few minutes just to discuss what the topic was, and that is what is coming up in the legislatures that have a particular impact to our tri-municipal area within the next year. And I'd like to start with Senator again, please, and to give us this, although I think we should be a little quick through this section of the program. Thank you.
Okay, I'll be quick. And well, I think the biggest, we have three major buckets of things hanging over our head. We have COVID and the impact of COVID on our communities, on the individuals here, the rollout of the vaccine, which has been bumpy and is not as good as we would like. That is a very short-term crisis that affects all of our communities, and certainly these communities here at the summit. Second is a significant budget deficit at the state level that will impact both state and local governments, our villages and towns. The governor said 16 billion. I think that's a great overstatement, and he didn't defend it. I think it's closer to 8 billion, still a huge number, and it affects all of the state's ability to fund the programs that we depend on. For me, as the chair of education, schools number one are impacted by this shortfall, as well as every other form of state funding, whether it's through social services to the county, whether it's for aid to municipalities, for various municipalities that get direct state funding, all of our agencies, including state parks, corrections. So the state budget shortfall is a very significant challenge that we're going to have to deal with. And third, this issue that you just raised, Ann, is something we're going to have to struggle with, which is how do we respond to this attempted coup at the federal level and change the way our society is dealing with disagreement, and basically how do we confront this violent strain that exists within our state as well as at the national level. So I think we have to deal with all three as we move back into the budget. The governor is going to present his proposed budget next week. Today is the second day of the State of the State. So I think, though, just in big global pots that affect Mamaroneck and Larchmont, those are the things, and particularly the budget shortfall and the impact on schools is something that is very, very pressing.
Thank you. Assemblyman Steve Otis.
Sure. Well, just following on some of Shelley's comments, I think a big factor is going to be the timing of the Biden administration and the new Congress in terms of how quickly they get new relief to states and local governments. And our state budget has to be passed by April 1st. It would be good if we get some clear signals of what the new administration is going to be able to deliver. And it'll help piece together the very challenging budget we have. If you look at the number of people that are commuting into New York City, which is way down, you realize that the biggest economic engine for the entire state is revenues produced by businesses that are based in New York City, and they are getting crushed right now. The local little merchants and people in office buildings frequent are struggling in Westchester, but also struggling in New York, where the people are not there. In terms of, so that's number one is the budget. Some of the issues that I am working on, I'll name one other budget issue. You know, I'm big on the clean water and the state's major commitment to clean water, but because of COVID, all of the state grant programs, basically, whether it was economic development or the water grant program, were suspended in 2020. It's as if that year of funding did not happen. And for instance, both the two villages and the town have gotten grants from the water program. The town got $1 million grant for a clean water infrastructure. That money's going to happen, but we need a new round of money in 2021 to keep helping at the local level with things that are going on there. One issue that I've been very involved with, as has Shelley, is the storm recovery issue. And Catherine also, everyone's very concerned, George, at the county about the lack of response by Con Ed, by Altice, by Verizon in the storm that we had in August. And so we have a group, sort of an ad hoc group that was set up a few years ago of local officials and state legislators called United Westchester. We just came out with a report. One of the components of the report is a proposal that I've had for a few years to put on a burden on electric utilities that when there is an outage, there's a time-based target for their having to restore power, because we've gone through this too many times with Con Ed where it's 6, 7, 8, 10 days. And it seems like lots of excuses, and yeah, these are big storms, but they should staff and have equipment and be prepared to respond quickly and to restore power within a schedule that the State Public Service Commission would set. So that is a priority of mine this year. Another area is that I was just appointed by Speaker Carl Hastie to be chair of a new exciting committee, a new standing committee in the State Assembly on science and technology. And this is something the Senate already had, a similar committee. And what we're going to be looking at out of the box is some of the very important online and internet privacy issues, which California and the European Union have tried to grapple with. Want to look at ransomware and the ability to protect local governments and school districts from being extorted by criminals, and other sort of new technology issues is what I am very interested in getting some stuff done this year. A very exciting opportunity. Back to COVID, and one of the pieces of COVID and also in the criminal justice issues that we dealt with in the past year is the unequal impact of so much that goes on based upon poverty, based upon color. And we passed a package of bills after the George Floyd incident, murder this year at the state to try and address some of these issues in the criminal justice area. But there needs to be more care in so many state and other governmental policies as relates to implicit racism that occurs in some of our institutions. And I know from the Assembly side, we are going to be looking at other opportunities to make a difference on some of those issues related to COVID and related to other things even outside of criminal justice.
Thank you. I can tell you that having been on the receiving end after Sandy of citizens' ire and receiving all of these reassurances from Con Ed as to what they were going to do, break away wires, changing the grid, and nothing happened. So, and then coming back last summer and not having any power for 7 days. So keep pushing, keep pushing. Catherine, your turn. What's happening on the county level? That impact.
So I'll start with our budget, because we just passed our budget a few weeks ago, and we anticipated that there was going to be a cut to state aid. And as you know, our budget, it's just about $2 billion for Westchester County. And we were able to continue all services and yet still reduce the tax levy by $1 million. So that was very good news, I think, for taxpayers in Westchester County, that, again, you know, all the essential services that we provide are still going to be running full steam. And as a matter of fact, to that point, you know, and as county government, I think this year alone, people have seen more of what county government does than ever before. I mean, usually it's, I think for most people, it's a big black hole of, you know, what exactly. But I think that, you know, with our health department, certainly we've been at the forefront. Just last night, we voted at the board to appropriate $7 million to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant in Mamaroneck. And just so you know, I took a look on the schedule. This year, we have about $29 million worth of capital projects that we will be doing for my legislative district. And so government continues, you know, roads will continue to be repaved and infrastructure projects will continue to happen. I do want to talk a little bit about, you know, one of my responsibilities and related to COVID has been, I co-chair the county's pandemic reopening task force, which is really focused on how do we help businesses in Westchester. And it's been a very, a great group of people that I work with as part of this task force. Michael Romita from the Westchester County Association, John Ravitz from the Business Council of Westchester, Jan Fisher from the nonprofit Westchester, Janet Langsam from Arts Westchester, and on and on and on. You know, our healthcare providers, Open Door, for instance. And so I consider it the A-team. And because of their networks, I've actually had access to a regular weekly meeting with Washington insiders to talk about what the plans are for the Biden administration. So I do know that from our meeting last week that the Biden administration really wants to come out very early with a federal package to help state and local governments. And I think that they're looking in the trillions of dollars because, as we know, that, you know, that last infusion was really just a drop in the bucket for what all governments around the country need to really help combat COVID. So we are going to see, I think, something in the first 90 days of the Biden administration, which it will, I think, be welcome news to my colleagues in state government and to all of us. On another aspect of what I do as a legislator leading this group of business people, I passed legislation last fall to help what I consider our backbone of small business in Westchester, our restaurants and food service businesses. And I passed a piece of legislation to cap the third-party food delivery charge. Now, those third-party deliveries, that's Uber Eats, Grubhub, DoorDash, just to name some of them, were really squeezing our businesses, charging 30% of what you're paying when you order food online or when you order food through those services. You know, they were really squeezing our restaurants. They're very, very slim margins of profit with those businesses. So my task force, we discussed this and I brought it to my colleagues and we passed that. I think what I'm looking at for the next few months, we will be doing a second piece of legislation related to helping our small businesses, because there seems to be a practice going on with some of these companies where they are representing that they have a contract with a particular, let's take the Nautilus, for instance. They're representing that they have the Nautilus and they'll have a menu up on their website, and somebody will inadvertently, they'll see that, they'll order, and there is no contract, there is no relationship. And oftentimes what these third-party delivery services will do is they will find a very old menu on the internet, which has prices from 5 years ago. It may even have different selections of food that the restaurant no longer serves, and people will order it. And of course, restaurants and small businesses, they want to please, they're in the customer service business too. And they want to, make sure the customer is happy, and it puts them in an extremely difficult position. And it's just really unfair. So that's something that we're looking to stop. And as far as other legislation going forward, I think that I can probably speak for my state colleagues too. COVID is really a priority issue problem, that every time we see another aspect of this problem that needs to be solved, we all jump on it as, okay, we've got to take care of this, ASAP. So again, because of the pandemic task force, one of the things I'm very interested in is, I do believe that we can continue to develop, business in Westchester. It's still a great place to do business, but how do we, give businesses those resources? And we have a great director of economic development. I work very closely with Bridget Gibbons. Bridget has a program. It's the Launch 1000 program to help startups and new businesses. And my committee at the board, the Committee of Planning, Economic Development, and Energy, will be having a meeting with Bridget next Monday. It's a public meeting. People are welcome to tune in and find out more, but there will be county money that will be put towards helping small business with, some practical items and practical dollars, most importantly, to get off the ground. And we think those dollars are going to come back to us in terms of sales tax revenue, in terms of, what they're generating, hiring people and spending. So it's a good investment. Every dollar that we're going to be giving to these small businesses, we think is going to be a multiplier. And so that's something that I'm very excited about for 2021.
Thank you, Catherine. We received a bundle of questions from our board, and you've received them. I would like to have sort of a lightning round, if you will. I've broken them down, and some of these topics have already been spoken, have been touched already this morning. But here are the three major topics of the questions that we've received. And I should tell all our participants that we're going to open the questions after the sort of lightning round for 10 minutes. And could you please use the chat function to ask any questions, but hold off a little until we get some answers. But I'd like to start off, first of all, with a compliment, probably mostly to the county, in that through some fast and furious finger work yesterday, I was able to get an appointment for a shot, or a jab, as the Brits call it, at the county center in February. It took, it wasn't that hard once I got into the system, but I think it could be made a little clearer in that I had registered before. So I re-registered and then I got in. So thank you very much to all of those who you can see have worked so hard. And don't call, please, Rye Pharmacy. That voicemail is one of absolute panic. We haven't got the vaccine. So compliments to the county, and I would suggest that anybody else looking would try at the county center for starters. Okay, 3 topics. Number 1, under COVID, but really you have touched the vaccine, its distribution, and the problems. You have touched helping state and local governments and small businesses. But what you haven't touched is the eviction crisis that is coming soon, and the right to counsel legislation that exists on the county and the state level. Okay, number 1. Number 2, We can't forget the flooding issue in Mamaroneck and that Army Corps of Engineers plan. And now under a new administration, let's hope we can dust it off and start up. And how much do you think we can get state and local support in that regard? Thirdly, believe it or not, we still have our election issues. Early voting, in other words, have clarification of early voting, absentee voting, and an increase in voting locations, especially for early voting. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my lightning round request. I'm going to start with Senator Shelley Mayer.
Okay, I'm going to stick with those, but I just want to mention, because we're restricted in time, some things that we didn't get to say that really are relevant to Mamaroneck. One is excluded workers. We didn't talk about that. All of our workers who work in the restaurants in Mamaroneck and Larchmont and elsewhere who are not eligible for unemployment. They are a big part of the Mamaroneck community and of this community. They were not eligible for unemployment. They got laid off. They have been longtime members of our community. Community Resource Center has done a fantastic job with them, yet there are not benefits for them. That is something Steve and I and the state legislature are struggling to find a path forward. We're prohibited from using unemployment, but there are some other options on the table. And I just want to mention that is really having a disproportionate impact on communities like Mamaroneck. So I want to mention that. I want to say on the first point about addiction and the right to counsel, first place credit to our county executive, George Latimer, who has really been an extraordinary leader and partner for Steve and I, and obviously for the county in working on these kinds of issues. So they have the most fantastic commissioner, Orth, in the county, who is very focused, along with my colleague, Pete Harcum, on the impact of COVID on rising rates of addiction, suicide, and other kinds of behavior that have really been exacerbated. We have to put resources in. That's why this getting federal money, as Catherine referenced, is absolutely critical. We have two things. We need federal money for state programs like OASIS and OMH, all of these programs that filter down into the county. If we don't get federal money, we are subject to cutting them next year. That's not acceptable. So we need federal money, and I believe we need to find additional state revenues. And we haven't even talked about that, but that is a critical issue before the legislature. Can we agree that the state needs to make those who are at the very top of the economic scale really be equally involved in sacrifice during this moment? So I would just say on addiction and on right to counsel, which I strongly support, we should have what they have in New York City. Every tenant, for example, has a right to counsel. Under George's leadership, the county is moving forward towards a study of that. So that number one. Am I allowed to go through the other two?
Yes, please.
On the Army Corps of Engineers in Mamaroneck, the best friend we have on this issue is Senator Schumer, the new majority leader. I have worked with him on flooding issues. I have worked with him to force the Army Corps of Engineers to do what they were obliged to do. Now that he is the most powerful person in the Senate, and I'm sure he's going to come back to Mamaroneck and see that we need this, I am confident we can push. And I want to give a shout out to his local staff, which I call every week to insist that they pay attention to our local issues, whether they're education. I've invited him to come to Portchester. We need Senator Schumer to be our fighter on this Army Corps of Engineers money, and I think that we will have it. Lastly, on election early voting, yesterday the Senate passed about 10 bills to deal with early voting and absentee voting. They will, I think, ultimately get passed in a similar form, or we will work out an arrangement with the Assembly. We have to address the failure to have enough early voting sites, as you pointed out, and that really hurt us in Mamaroneck, particularly in the primary. That was just unacceptable, as well as a process by which they can start to process these absentee ballots, and we don't have to wait until election night. Even in my contested election, I did not get a result for over 6 weeks because they did not get the absentee ballots counted in my race, which was a fairly innocuous race, but I had an opponent. It should have been done at the beginning. It should have been absolutely out of the question. we have made significant progress, and we committed yesterday to really improving, and I have a list of bills, which I'll put in the chat, that we have moved in our house, and I think similar versions will move in the Assembly.
Well, thank you. As an old president of the League of Women Voters, I love that stuff. So thank you very much. Assemblyman Steve Otis.
Sure. Well, I'm going to obey your lightning round rules to a point, but I have to start off with an issue that Catherine mentioned, which is this delivery services for restaurants. And we have a bill in Albany to accomplish the same thing. And I have to tell you a story. A restaurant in Albany who somebody was saying, we're going to deliver for you one of these services. And the restaurant called up and said, we didn't sign up with you. We have no relationship with you. Take us off of your thing. And they were told, well, to remove yourself from our service, you have to fill out our drop service form. And the owner of the restaurant said, I didn't sign up with you. I'm not filling out any form. But it shows you the hostage taking that goes on. And restaurants are having a hard enough time right now. And so this is an important issue. In terms of the eviction, let me mention excluded workers. One thing that we have to do, because so many of our residents who are not qualified for unemployment insurance or these other things, they're depending upon the not-for-profit communities like Community Resource Center and other kinds of community organizations, not-for-profits. And so one thing that I've been pushing for months is to try and prioritize those kinds of not-for-profits in terms of the state releasing state funding to support the efforts of those not-for-profits, because they're keeping people afloat. That is what is going on. In terms of eviction, Shelley and I both supported legislation that passed a couple of weeks ago, right around Christmas time, a special session to extend the eviction moratorium till essentially May. There's some caveats and things, but one thing that was done is people have to certify that if they're not paying rent, it is for a hardship that is really related to COVID. It's not just they're not paying rent, and also relief for small landlords so that they are not foreclosed upon, by their bank or for tax liens. And in the federal money, what I know both houses are seeking is some of that federal money going to help pay back rent for people that have been out of work because of COVID, and also to get some money to some of these small landlords for their shortfall. So we'll see what the federal money looks like, what the rules are, but this is very important. The flooding issue, and Shelley was very good to mention Senator Schumer, because we've all been on the ground in Mamaroneck with Senator Schumer after flood events. He's been here, and so that is an important thing. But we got torpedoed by the Trump administration in terms of a flood project that the Army Corps was very enthusiastic about. They study many things that never happened. The Mamaroneck project was one where the Army Corps folks that we spoke to, this was a green lighted project. This was going forward, and we have to make sure we get over to the top. And beyond the federal funding, there's an important state financial contribution and county financial contribution to go along with the villages portion. So this is a true partnership between all levels of government. In terms of the elections, Shelley mentioned some bills that were on the Senate agenda this week. The Assembly is going to be conferencing those bills next week, and we'll figure out, what kinds of changes or things. But Shelley mentioned the number one thing is we need more polling places for early voting. And even in the general election this year, we did not have enough polling locations. We had lines. I chose to vote on election day in person because I figured I would get a shorter line then than I was going to get on the early voting location. So we need to devote more resources to that, because that is also a money issue, but a lot more scrutiny. And I know this has been an issue for Catherine as well, and for our county executive, to try and get the standards improved in this area for voters, especially during COVID. We don't want people waiting online anywhere. And one last shout out on the storm stuff, just someone who's been very involved in the report that I mentioned earlier is Jane Eney, who played a leadership role as part of this report that we did related to Con Ed and utility changes in utility practices. So there's my lightning round. I need a bell to.
Yeah, okay. Ding-a-ling, you're on. Go.
First of all, thank you, Anne, for mentioning the Westchester County Center as an addition for where people can get the vaccination. And here is where I think it's really important to give a shout out to our County Executive, George Latimer. You know, George sits on the state's COVID task force, he and the county executives from Suffolk and Nassau. And George has always had a good relationship with Governor Cuomo. And I know that our addition of the Westchester County Center for Wednesday, I give credit to George and no one else for making that happen so quickly. You know, I think that was in the works for a little while, and certainly I'm glad that it was announced yesterday. I will say with the right to counsel, now going to your lightning round, I've been in support of right to counsel. That being said, not having it yet at the county level or the state level, the county has set aside about $12 million in different buckets to really help those people that are in a precarious situation and possibly, you know, looking at future eviction to help resolve those situations. And we also have set aside some funding to help landlords. And as Assemblyman Otis mentioned, the, you know, for those that are worried that they could potentially be foreclosed and they're small property owners, this is something that, you know, our staff are really there to help navigate for some of those landlords to make sure that they have protections too. So we're really focused on that. One of the things that we did do in this budget that we just passed a few weeks ago is we did add money for a study on right to counsel. And, you know, we think that this is going to really probably show that that's the direction that we need. And we expect that will be done, I think, in the first 6 months of 2021, that we will have results already of the study. So we're you know, making sure that happens. To the Army Corps of Engineers project, you know, this is something that I feel like all of us are, you know, we've got gray hair from the time this first came to be. And one of the beauties of that Army Corps of Engineers project was that it was it had bipartisan support from the local level all the way through. I think people understood in government on every level, this was the right thing to do. It wasn't until this president, and only this president, who took the pen to it and said no longer, using his budget office, no longer is this project does it pass the cost benefit analysis test? And that was, I think, a manipulation of data. And I fully expect with the new administration that we will, you know, see that. And I know that at the county level, both the county executive and I are going to champion that. And I have no doubt that we will be in full support. Your last question, the early voting and voting sites. I've been a bit of a critic of our commissioners of the Board of Elections. I had asked for data after seeing the early voting started in 2019. I felt that we almost didn't have an early voting site in District 7. My entire legislative district was not originally slated to have an early polling site, if you can imagine. You know, I don't think it's a success when you have lines that are 4 hours long. That to me shows failure. So I've been, you know, asking our commissioners, I tried prior to the primary to ask them to really dig into data and figure out likely voters, to really have a number that they could reasonably have an expectation that they could serve the people of Westchester County. I did not see that happen to a satisfactory level. So I appreciate and thank you to my colleagues at the state level for putting a priority on a package of legislation to, I think, help on voting issues. And I will say that with the county board of elections, that unfortunately the state board of elections, it's kind of a that's really where there's some that's who they answer to, and ultimately, the governor is really tasked with deciding if those people are making the decisions that are working for all of us. So I think I've answered all your lightning round, and go on to your next.
Okay, I've been reading the questions in chat, and just let me put that up again. Okay. Just a second, I see some. From Lori Feinstein, my question is, putting forth legislation, are you putting forth legislation that mimics Congressman Bowman's bill that provides for investigating police department ties to white supremacist organizations and actions? Do we have a New York State version ready to go, or a county version?
Well,
I'm
sorry. Yeah, no, just jump in. I suspect that next week, we in the Senate, led by a number of my colleagues, particularly focused based on the conduct of what was disclosed today in the Times about the officer in the New York City Police Department who is responsible for a lot of the equal employment opportunity work, who they have found to have, they believe, posted all this racist material anonymously on a sort of a private chat of the police department, combined with the evidence that I think, and I was going to raise it earlier, clearly there are some real substantive issues to be dealt with here about the infiltration of this riotous behavior within police departments and sympathies of some police officers with this movement. That is bigger than the New York City Police Department, our local police departments, where hopefully it's very minimal. I think we are going to have a very focused inquiry in the Senate, and I suspect in the Assembly, about what we're going to do with that. Let me just say that as someone who, along with Steve, we worked on these very significant criminal justice changes after the murder of George Floyd. I met with all the chiefs of the local police departments in Westchester, along with some of my colleagues, on multiple occasions. We had very productive conversations with some and very hostile conversations with others. And I think the governor's effort to force municipalities to have these conversations and redo their police practices is a very forward-thinking idea. We have to do it, but frankly, it doesn't go far enough. And that's what's been exposed in what happened last Wednesday. We are going to have to either do legislation, do hearings, or have other inquiry as to how we can do a better job of ensuring that this kind of toxic thinking does not infiltrate our law enforcement, not just police departments either. But again, the vast majority of our officers don't share this, but we can't have it at all. And we have to do a better job of weeding it out. I am confident we are going to focus on that.
Great. Assemblyman Otis, would you care to comment?
Sure.
Anything?
One of, we had, as Shelley mentioned, we had a package of 10 bills after the George Floyd murder. I think in the Assembly from Westchester, I was the only person that was a co-sponsor of all 10 of them. But some of them were related to dealing with trying to quantify and control, tabulate what kind of bias is going on in the administration of law right now, so that we have real numbers to push back on and see what's going on department by department. I think that the governor's executive order is a fantastic step and a first step, because and I'm following this very closely in all the communities I represent, and it's being done differently in different communities. But it's a conversation, and it's not meant to be necessarily dump on the police. It's meant to be a fresh conversation about what the people in a community think policing should be, a fresh conversation. It should be collaborative. And in places where it's done well, it's that kind of conversation. And the police folks in a community where it's done well are fully engaged in listening and hearing what residents have to say, hearing what the complaints are, and trying to move to a different place. But whether it's police or any other kind of government agency, employee, we all, if you serve the public, you have a responsibility to leave your personal feelings or biases at the door. You have a responsibility to administer justice or administer a program from the Department of Health or Department of Social Services on an even-handed basis. And so this is something that more broadly we have to look at, and maybe remind everyone who serves the public that their responsibility is equal administration of the law, of services, of justice if it's an issue of law enforcement. Maybe there's a refresher course for everybody that you have a responsibility for the whole society, and much as Joe Biden has said in sending a very good message about his attitude when he takes office, he said that he's going to represent everybody. Well, that's all of our burden, and that's the burden of anyone who works for a local government, a county government, a state government, for any kind of service. They represent everybody and have to provide services with that fairness and that equal justice and equal charity and equal service under the law. So we have a lot of work to do, but talking about it is a good thing, and it raises consciousness. And one last thing, what Trump has done in this country is he has validated the underbelly of bigotry and hate that maybe was for the last 50 years said this is unacceptable, and he has now legitimized that, and we have to push back against that also. That we're back to pre-1950s in terms of what people are able to do in this country, at least in some quarters. It's not acceptable, and we have to say that.
Okay, thank you. County Legislator Parker, you probably have a closer relationship with many police forces than in our state level. You have a county police force and jurisdiction over many villages and towns that don't have their own.
So for clarification, our county police basically are road patrol. You know, we have a couple of county roads, Bronx River Parkway, for instance, and Playland Parkway, and some of our other roads that, you know, we are out there, and it's very much patrol. Plus we have sort of the larger shared service of for municipal government, you know, the county helicopter, for instance, because it would be silly for every municipality to have to invest in that type of equipment. But the other thing that we have is a county police academy. And I really feel that the county police academy is can play a critical role here in really help bring Westchester County police service versus police force up to a level where there is, you know, really service first and helping people, and you know, really dealing with, you know, making sure that there's an education that goes into people that want to serve as police officers, and understanding that as human beings, we all bring implicit bias, and we have to, you know, have that in our consciousness so that we can help to fight that when naturally we may have an implicit bias towards something. I mean, that's again, human nature. Today is a very important day on this topic in county government. And I will tell you, we are having a presentation starting at 1 o'clock today. And again, you can find this meeting on the web. But our task force for reimagining policing in Westchester, for Westchester County, our Westchester County policing is going to be presenting their report which they've been working on over the last several months. And I am interested to see if that report is going to take into consideration exactly what Congressman Bowman has proposed on the national level, if there's going to be a recognition that we need to dig deeper into our local police to understand if, God forbid, you know, there's a significant infiltration of our police. So I think that I'm going to be participating I'm not on the task force, but I will be watching that meeting later on today. And just as another piece of that, you know, during the course of the last few years, I've been very vocal that we needed criminal justice reform. When I was majority leader for the county board, we passed a resolution to the state, you know, supporting their look at passing criminal justice reform. One of the things that Westchester offers is the youth shelter of Westchester. And I felt that when Raise the Age was being looked at the state level, that Westchester had this model for how to handle young people who have been caught up in the criminal justice system, which really looked at them as an individual holistically, was a model that we needed to see replicated. And I still believe that. They unfortunately are a very small program and only handle a very small portion of people that are in the justice system. But I will be speaking on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock with the Youth Council of Westchester is having author Michael Eric Dyson, who has written 29 books on social justice, and this will be very focused on criminal justice. And I posted about the event on my Facebook page, Catherine Parker, and I would say join me for that. As far as legislation, let's see what this report says today, and then I would be happy to sponsor something on the county level that would mirror what Congressman Bowman has done. If it's missing from our task force, which I suspect it will not be.
Terrific. I have two more questions on the chat, and then I think we're frankly running out of time. One of them concerns the county special districts and the taxation. It's a detailed question, and Catherine, if you could please take a look at that, I'd really appreciate you answering Rod Reef on that. I know special district taxation is a real day-to-day issue, but may not be of interest to absolutely everybody except really in the pocketbook. But the last question I would like everybody to answer is, how polarized are the state Senate and Assembly? And that is, can you work effectively with your Republican colleagues?
Well, I was just about to answer that in the chat, and first of all, there's sort of two different things. There's majority rules, and then there's polarization in terms of tone. So the Democrats in the state Senate have a super majority, a veto-proof majority now. We have 43 members. It's more than we need to override a veto of the governor. We have never had that before. That means that the minority, the Republicans, can object to bills. They can debate bills, but presuming the vast majority of our members vote together, as we do, because we conference and reach consensus decisions, they are unlikely to prevail in any debate or vote. That being said, I certainly, and the vast majority of my colleagues, we work very collegially. I didn't get to discuss my bill to have broadband for free for every child as part of our remote education under COVID, which I have a big plan to do. I've been working with my Republican colleagues upstate who have some concerns. So on an individual basis, we work very collegially. We have a debate that is sort of the model generally for what we should have in our deliberative bodies. But at the end of the day, yes, we work collegially, but we are a supermajority. That means that we decide the agenda, we bring the bills, we work collegially with the Assembly majority, which is also Democratic, and with the governor to try to put forth a progressive agenda. That's part of why we ran, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm very, very honored to serve. I stick to my guns about the principles that I believe are the vast majority of my constituents. And when we have constituents, I just want to say this, who strongly disagree, as we all do, with our underlying principles, including our response to what happened last week, we have an obligation to speak to those people and try to explain the best we can. But at the end of the day, we were elected to really stand for something. And this is a moment when we have to stand up and stand for something. And I have no apologies about being very strong in my response to what happened last week. For those who disagree, I respectfully disagree with them, and I'm not going to change my view about that.
How are things in the Assembly?
You know, I think it follows what Shelley was saying. I mean, I think among the Assembly Republicans, and we also have had a long time supermajority in the Assembly with Democrats, but the Republicans, the debates are intelligent, they're civil. You know, once in a while you'll have somebody who's a little over the top, but you know what? There's some Democrats that are a little over the top at times too. And so, but actually very good relations with Republican colleagues in both houses. And you know, I think that one thing that is worth reflecting upon both at the county level and at the state level is issues aren't necessarily always crystallized to perfection when they come and at our lap initially, that there is a process of deliberation, a process of hearing what people have to say and improving the end product. And so this occurs at a local municipal board level, at the county board of legislators level, and in the Senate and the Assembly. And so we have a Democratic majority in both houses, but we don't necessarily have the finished product until our conference talks about bills in great detail and things change. Shelley's conference talks about bills in great detail, things change. There's a negotiation. And I will tell you, especially in some of the criminal justice stuff that we've done over the last few years, raise the age and the bail reform and the speedy trial, there were major changes from the original bills based upon comments that we heard from the public, that comments we heard from colleagues. So I just say on every issue, the deliberation is what you want. We are, you know, back to what's going on in Washington. We believe in democracy and reason. Democracy was founded a few hundred years ago, the age of reason. We have to live that in what we do in the work product that we put out at every level of government. I believe in quality control, and that means listening, taking care to do it right if you can. And if you made a mistake along the way, you can go back and fix that legislation the next year. But that kind of thoughtfulness is very important. It means, back to your question about Republicans, Democrats, they may not have the votes in either house in the state legislature, but if they raise an issue that is intelligent and is worthy of looking at a provision of a bill, it's going to get looked at, and that's the right way to go.
Yeah, that's the important thing, that has the feeling that you're all participants in this project for democracy, all participants. You've all been elected, and that don't totally squeeze out the people from the other side, because eventually they will get back into power and they do it right back again. And that happened with Gingrich, it happened with Reed, it's happened on the national level. You know, people couldn't get a box of Kleenex through, and then they say, we're going to get you right back again. And look where we are. Catherine, I'm going to give you the chance to finish it off as far as.
Sure. So first, to my friend Rodman Reef, who sits on our county citizen budget advisory committee and has done tremendous work for I think the last 7 years. I appreciate his question, and I know this is an area of frustration for him. Last year, I had put in a memo to our chairman of the board that when we had to renew our contract with our county auditor, and that the special districts had always been sort of passed over during the time that our auditor was was preparing a report for our budget. And so I put in something saying, please specifically, we should have an expectation that they will be working throughout, much earlier than just the budget season, really taking a hard dive and hard look at our special districts. And our budget committee, I don't chair our budget committee, although I do sit on the budget committee. I think our budget chair had every intention of having a subcommittee of her committee that would look at special districts, and she works closely with CBAC. And I think with COVID, that probably just didn't come to fruition. So maybe Rodman 2021 is the year. But to the question of working with your colleagues to get things done. I will say that I've had lots of experience where I was the only Democrat on an elected board, and I've also had the experience where I've been in a supermajority. A piece of legislation that I passed as majority leader that I really, it ended up going along party lines, was paid sick leave. And the sticking point was the number of employees to cover. And I felt very strongly, we were looking at businesses that had 5 employees or more needed to provide paid sick leave. This was in 2018. My Republican colleagues were saying that they were more comfortable with 10. And it sounds like it's not a big change, but we're talking hundreds of thousands of people in Westchester County that may have not had coverage to take time off. And this was in 2018, 2 years before COVID, before the state had passed paid sick leave. And I decided that, I had the votes within my caucus to pass it at 5. And because it was a public health issue, I really wasn't willing to negotiate on that point, to what Senator Mayer was just saying, that sometimes people do elect us to stand up for our values. And on something as important as public health, where really we are talking about potentially something that threatens somebody else's life, including the public's, by the way, I decided, well, if you can't see the rationale for going to 5, I respect your decision not to support this legislation, but we're moving ahead. And I look back on that now, and I think I'm very glad that I stuck to my guns, and that was not a point that I was willing to negotiate. But we've been able to accomplish quite a lot. I've always been able to accomplish a lot, even when I was, as I say, the only Democrat on my board. So, it's how, you take a look at the task and how you can make things happen, and respecting one another and respecting a difference of opinion too sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're lucky to have 3 elected officials on the state and county level that we can be proud of. And I really appreciate your openness, your intelligence, and please keep up the good work. And for God's sakes, be safe. I want to thank you all. I want to thank LMC-TV for putting together the production of this. Elaine, are there any closing words?
I just want to once again thank everybody for your wonderful presentation. These are certainly fraught times, and your job is not an easy one. And we're all very grateful that you're there to battle for all of us. I want to thank Anne also for hosting this today. And we'll see you next month, everybody, the second Tuesday of the month. Have a good week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Anne.
Yes.
Thank you, Elaine.
Elaine and Anne, thank you so much. And to all the participants and my colleagues, thank you.
And to Brother Yiser up above, as I look at that booth, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Very, very sad.
Yeah.
Thank you all.